Hello, welcome to day 464. And of course, we're in NTI Revelation. And NTI Revelation is really interesting, partially because Revelation is really interesting. Revelation has lots of dark visions about the wrath of God and the few who are saved and get taken up to heaven, etc. And then at the end, it's really kind of about a new world, about a new Jerusalem and a new heaven. It's very dramatic. When I was the scribe of NTI and I got to NTI Revelation, what Holy Spirit did with this drama was it reinterpreted Revelation for me in a useful way. Some of the flavor of the drama still got into the interpretation, but I don't think that's completely inappropriate. And I guess this is what I want to talk to you about today. I don't know when you're going to go through what I call purification. Purification is when you have a very serious opportunity to look at false beliefs that you hold, conditioning that you have picked up in this lifetime, strong emotions that you've repressed. What happens during the purification period is a lot of this stuff comes up on a fairly regular basis. Now, I say fairly regular because my experience was that there were breaks. There were periods of, calm, peace, joy, in between the upheavals that were the purification. The upheavals, however, were quite dramatic. I think the reason for this is because prior to the purification period, we are actually masters of denial and repression. And so when we are triggered and there are negative thoughts and negative emotions, we repress, deny, project, and we also, engage in other types of defense mechanisms to avoid the experience of what we're believing when it gets really negative. What happens during the purification process is we have become ready. That's the interesting thing about the purification process, is it doesn't actually happen until you've become ready. It's possible it won't even happen in this lifetime if you're not ready in this lifetime. But when we get ready for the purification process and we are genuinely ready, that's when these upheavals happen. That's when all of this stuff begins to come up. And it is quite dramatic because we have denied and repressed and projected and in other ways defended against this so much, so well, so long. And now we aren't doing that. Somehow in our readiness for purification, we stop the defense. We stop the defense mechanisms. And we allow this stuff to come up in full. And we be with it in a way that is healing. And this is what moves us from being primarily driven by our conditioning to being free to live in inspiration instead. So I'm asking myself, what do I want to say about this? Because I have gone through it. I remember how challenging it was. And yet, what I want to tell you is when I went through it, I was grateful to be in that process. I was genuinely grateful to be in the process of purification, because at that time I called it healing. I knew this healing had to happen. You know, using the language of NTI Luke, I had been sick, right? Because I had all of this false beliefs, all of this untrue conditioning, because I was a robot to the ego. I had been sick and I wanted to be well. I wanted to be free. I wanted to see with clarity. I wanted to realize truth. And so I knew to get from here to here, I had to go through here. I want to say that the purification process can feel difficult, but I also want to say it doesn't hurt you. I want to say that sometimes you feel very, very alone during the purification process. And I want to tell you that you're never, ever actually alone. I want you to know that most people avoid this stuff coming up with every ounce of energy they have. And really the best thing to do is to lay back and to rest, or sit back and rest, or walk and rest. But the best thing to do is to rest and let this happen, because you are walking through the darkness to the light. And it's the only way to get there. It's the path. It's the way. I want to share with you something that was helpful to me when I was going through the purification process. It's actually, there were 2 different movies that were very helpful to me, maybe 3. They were movies that I saw either prior to the purification process starting for me or during the purification process that were extremely helpful. The first one that came to my mind was Little Buddha. In fact, I have it set up to share something with you. So let me share my screen. This is on YouTube. It's the scene that was particularly helpful for me. It's called the Little Buddha Enlightenment, because it's the enlightenment scene. So you can go on to YouTube and look for this. I'll even put a link in the description of this video. 9 minutes and 36 seconds. It was really helpful for me to watch this particular scene, because in this scene, all of this stuff comes up for Buddha, and he just sits and watches it. And that was helpful for me because it helped me to have that same posture, although I wasn't typically sitting in meditation. I still had that posture of just watching it, letting it happen and watch it, letting it happen and watch it. It's the superconductor process. I called it rest, accept, and trust. I'll go ahead and tell you about the other 2 movies that were helpful. One was a movie called Revolver by Guy Ritchie. It's a very violent movie. It's about con men and gangsters. But in this particular movie, near the end of the movie, there is a character that wakes up. And in particular, those 2 scenes, one is at the end of a bed and the other one is in an elevator. Those 2 scenes in particular were really helpful for me as I was going through the purification process, because the ego can get quite loud. And in these scenes, it showed how he beed, I know that's not a word, but he was being, he beed with that loud, loud voice. And I found those scenes very, very helpful. Another movie that was also helpful, which is a delightful movie, is A Beautiful Mind by Ron Howard. And in this movie, the main character has schizophrenia, and he needs to learn to ignore the unreal. And of course, that's what we're also doing, not repressing it, not denying that we see it, but not believing it either. And in fact, we had something in our reading this week that talked about that. Let me go back, see if I can find that particular. Yeah, it was in NTI Revelation chapter 2. It said, within you there is a voice. It seems to be an evil voice that speaks of hatred and viciousness and attack. And of course, it talks about other things too: jealousy, unworthiness, guilt, blame. I could go on, but I won't. You know the voice. Within you there is a voice. It seems to be an evil voice that speaks of hatred and viciousness and attack. But this voice is not evil, nor is it to be hated or feared. Because again, if you hate it or if you fear it, you're going to be repressing. And what we want to do during the purification process is let everything up without any defense mechanisms. It says, here is how you are to see the voice that seems vicious. This voice seeks for your happiness, but it has become confused. It's confused. It's confused about what you are and what will make you happy. It doesn't know that knowing your true self is the key to happiness. So it wants you to be happy. It's always trying to keep you safe and protect you. And it comes up with desires. If you get this, you'll be happy. Oh, that didn't work. Well, if you get this, you'll be happy, right? But it's confused. So instead of seeing the ego as something to fear or something to hate or something to resist, it's better to have compassion for it. It's just confused. It doesn't know who you are. It doesn't know what's in your best interest. Verses 8 to 10 in Revelation chapter 2 says, do not be afraid to hear the voice of confusion. Because when you're afraid to hear it, that's when you want to deny it, repress it, project it. Do not be afraid to hear the voice of confusion. To fear it is to believe it is truth. Hear the voice, but do not listen to it, right? That means let it chatter, but just don't believe it, right? Let it come up, but don't believe it. Do not be afraid to hear the voice of confusion. To fear it is to believe it is truth. Hear the voice, but do not listen to it. That means recognize its confusion and do not walk in the way that it asks. Have faith in me over what it says. Trust in your truth, and you will know your true happiness. Another thing that was in this last week's reading that I would like to point out, it was in NTI Revelation chapter 4. It talked about looking too deeply for the meaning of symbolism, analyzing details, searching for meaning, etc., etc. Last week, you heard the story of how I let go of the belief in suffering. When I was sick and I seemed to be suffering, what I knew to do was to rest. I think I mentioned that I knew not to go for a witch hunt in the brain, in the mind, looking for what caused me to suffer so much. In other words, I don't want to apply my thinking to figuring out what needs to be let go. When you apply your thinking to figuring out what needs to be let go, you're asking the ego to help you let go of the ego, and that's not going to work. So whenever this purification process happens for you, or whenever these emotions and these thoughts start coming up for you, your job is to rest. Be the superconductor. Rest, accept, and trust. That's your job. Anything that you need to see, you'll be guided to see it. If you need to practice inquiry in order to see it, you'll be guided in what questions to ask in the inquiry. You want to see it as your job to allow the healing, but you are not the healer. You're the patient. right? You allow the healing, but you are not the healer. You are not the doctor. You're not the surgeon. You're the patient. So your job is to do nothing, to rest, to allow, to stay out of the way, and trust the invisible physician to heal you. Now, again, you're reading about the purification process now. You may not go through it now. One thing you can do, and I did do, if you feel that you are ready, is you can pray. You can give your willingness. You can say, I would like to see that which is keeping me from knowing the truth. I remember I even prayed a prayer. I would like to go through this healing process as fast as I possibly can without scaring me so much that I stop. And I even remember when I was going through the process, sometimes I felt like I was getting it right at the edge of what I could handle. And then I would pray, I need a trust building period now. And things seemed to smooth out. And then there would be a period of my trust building. And then I would pray, okay, let me see what I need to see. And then it would start up again. So you can pray those types of prayers, whatever feels right for you. I know that some people just aren't ready. I remember once there were several people at my house, and I had received a thought from Inner Wisdom that day that said something like, ask to see what you've been denying, ask to let it come up. And when I came upstairs and I shared that with everyone, you could see the terror on their face. But there was something in our reading about that this week too. Here it is. It is in NTI Revelation chapter 2, verses 20 to 25. Sentence 3 says, the fear that you know comes from the guilt that is hidden. Without the guilt, there can be no fear. What that means is the reason that you are afraid to look at these false beliefs is because you think they're real. That's what the guilt means. You're afraid to look at them because you think they're your truth. And this is one reason why the awareness watching awareness meditation, the self-inquiry practice, that's why this is so important, paying attention to consciousness, isness awareness throughout the day. Because as we come to know ourself as we actually are better, right? And we know that better, and we're less identified with the person, with the mind, then we no longer see those thoughts as truth. They're just mental conditioning. They're just ideas. They're just thoughts. And then it's easier to set back and let them come up. It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to let them come up when we think they're the truth about us. So the fear that some people have about praying for the purification process and asking for this to come, they're still afraid they're going to see something terrible that's true about them. And that's not the case, because you are the isness awareness, the pureness. That's what you are. And there's nothing terrible, nothing that can affect you at all. So whether you're ready for this purification process or not, go ahead and read NTI Revelation. Again, it's going to be a little different than the other books. In fact, one of the things that's coming up this week that I want to talk about, it's pretty exciting, at least to me, is when you get to chapter 7, which will be on day 468, you're going to read about the 12 lessons, the 12 primary lessons that you have learned about in NTI. And then what we're going to do for the next 12 days in a row is we will take one of those 12 lessons and contemplate it. So for example, on day 468, you will be asked to contemplate lesson number 1 from chapter 7. And on day 469, lesson number 2, and on day 470, lesson number 3, etc. And this will continue until we've contemplated all 12 lessons. So that's one of the things that's coming up, or at least beginning this week. And of course, you're continuing with your awareness, watching awareness meditation. And of course, you'll have another weekend assignment. So I guess that's all I have to share with you today. If you want to, click the link that will be in the description and watch that scene from Little Buddha that's been helpful to me. Somebody put it up on YouTube, so it's possible at some point YouTube will consider it copywritten and taken it off. So if the link doesn't work anymore, you could search YouTube for Little Buddha. At least at one time, they offered the entire movie for a price like $3.99 or something. I'm not sure if they still do. Let me just look into that real quick before I stop here. I'm going to come up to the search bar and I'm just going to type in Little Buddha. Oh yeah, here it is, Little Buddha full movie. And well, there is a full movie that somebody's put on here. Here's the full movie right here, but I can't see where they're offering it for sale yet, but I do see the full movie in a few places. So you might be able to find it. This movie is getting harder and harder to find. I have the DVD and I hope to never let go of it. But if you can find the Little Buddha, the movie, you might enjoy watching the whole movie. But again, the clip that I'm putting in the description for as long as that lasts, that was at least helpful to me. All right, I'm going to let you go. Sorry to talk your leg off.